Before the first brick was laid in Uruk, before the first stone was cut for a pyramid, there was only the dark. Every culture on earth remembers this dark. The Egyptians called it Nun, the limitless, lifeless ocean. The Greeks called it chaos, the gaping void. The Norse called it Ginnungagap, the yawning abyss between fire and ice. It is the terrifying blank page before history begins. But the human mind abhors a vacuum. We cannot stare into the dark without lighting a fire. And so, we told stories. We imagined a voice in the silence, a hand in the water, a spark in the cold. Tonight we are going to sit by the collective campfire of humanity and listen to how we, in every corner of the world, decided to explain the impossible fact that we exist at all. To understand how the ancient Egyptians imagined the beginning of the world, you must first forget the desert, forget the dry, shifting sands and the sun-bleached dunes that we associate with pyramids today. Instead, you must imagine the water. Picture the Nile Valley not in the dry season, but in the season of Akhet, the inundation. It is late August in the deep past, 5,000 years ago. The river has swollen, fed by the monsoon rains far away in the Ethiopian highlands. It has burst its banks and swallowed the land. If you were standing on a high ridge, looking down at the valley, you would not see a ribbon of blue winding through green fields. You would see a vast, unbroken mirror. The water stretches from cliff to cliff, a brown, silent ocean covering the world. The villages are islands, isolated on high ground. The fields are gone. The roads are gone. There is only the dark, silt-heavy water, motionless under the summer sun. This is the landscape that gave birth to the Egyptian mind. And so, when they asked themselves, what was there before the world began? They did not imagine a void of empty space. They imagined this water. They called it Nun. Nun was the primeval ocean. It was infinite, dark, and motionless. It was not nothingness in the Western sense. It was a state of suspended potential. It was the raw material of existence, waiting in the dark, inert and silent. It contained everything that would ever exist, but dissolved, unformed, drifting in a slumber that had no beginning. For the ancient Egyptian farmer, looking out at the floodwaters, this was not a terrifying concept. It was a familiar one. He knew that under that brown water lay the nutrients that would feed his family. He knew that the flood was not death. It was a pause, a gestation. And then, just as it happens every year in the cycle of the Nile, something changed. Imagine the moment the flood begins to recede. The water level drops inch by inch. The tops of the reeds break the surface. The birds return. And then, the first patch of solid ground emerges from the chaos. It is a small, muddy hill. It is dark, wet, and glistening in the sun. It is the only solid thing in a universe of liquid. The Egyptians called this the Benben, the primeval mound. In their mythology, the moment of creation was not a sudden explosion of light. It was the emergence of land from water. It was the moment the Nun receded enough to let reality take a stand. This mound, this humble pile of drying mud, became the center of the universe. It was the first solid place where a god could rest his feet. This is why the pyramids look the way they do. The shape of the pyramid, the mir, is not random. It is a stone model of the Benben. It is the primeval mound, frozen in limestone, a stairway for the soul to climb back to the moment of creation. Every time a pharaoh built a pyramid, he was recreating the first hill, the place where order conquered chaos. So, the mound rises. But a mound is just earth. It needs a consciousness. On this lonely island of mud, the first god appears. His name varies depending on which city you ask. In Heliopolis, the city of the sun, they called him Atum. Atum is a fascinating figure. His name means the complete one, or the finisher. He created himself. He willed himself out of the none. He sat on the Ben Mound, the first being in existence, surrounded by the infinite dark ocean. The texts describe his state with a heavy existential sadness. He was alone in his circle. There was no sky to hold him, no earth to support him, no other voice to answer him. He was singular. To break this solitude, Atum had to divide himself. He could not create from outside materials, because there were none. He had to create from his own substance. The creation of the first two elements, air and moisture, is described in terms that are startlingly physical. The myth does not shy away from the biology of life. It says that Atum sneezed or spat, or, in some versions, engaged in a lonely act of procreation with his own shadow. From this act of separation came two children, Shu and Tefnut. Shu was the air, the dry wind, the space between things. He was the breath of life. Tefnut was the moisture, the dew, the corrosive and fertile power of water. Together they represented the fundamental duality of the Egyptian climate, the dry preserving air, and the wet creating moisture. Atum was no longer alone. He had a family. But the story takes a turn here that touches the heart of the Egyptian experience. The children, Shu and Tefnut, being curious and young, drifted away from their father. They wandered off into the dark expanse of the noon. Exploring the chaos, Atum remained on the mound, waiting. But the darkness was vast, and his children did not return. The Creator God began to worry. He feared that the chaos had swallowed them, that the order he had begun was already lost. So Atum removed his own eye. The Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Atum, is a separate entity in Egyptian myth, a force of power and perception. He sent his eye out into the darkness to search for his lost children. Time passed in the silence of the waters, and then the eye returned. It brought Shu and Tefnut back to the mound. The reunion was emotional. Atum, the great god, the complete one, looked at his returned children, and he wept. The tears of the god fell onto the Ben mound. They mixed with the fertile mud, and from those tears, human beings arose. There is a profound pun hidden in the Egyptian language here. The word for people, Ramet, sounds almost exactly like the word for tears, Ramut. The Egyptians believed that humanity was born from the sorrow and the joy of the Creator. Think about what this says about their view of life. In many other mythologies, humans are made from clay to be servants, like in Sumer, or they are an accident, or they are divine sparks trapped in flesh. But in Egypt we are tears. We are the product of emotion. We are born from a moment of relief after loss. This defines the Egyptian spirit. Their civilization was not grim. It was grateful. They lived in a narrow strip of black earth, surrounded by death, the desert, on both sides. They knew that life was fragile. They knew that the flood might not come, or it might come too high. Existence was a yearly struggle against the return of the chaotic waters. To be human was to be a tear of the sun god, precious, salty, and dropped onto the earth to struggle toward the light. As Shu and Tefnut grew, they gave birth to the next generation, Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. This brings us to the final piece of the architectural puzzle. In the beginning, Geb and Nut were locked in a tight embrace. The earth and the sky were crushed together, leaving no room for anything to live. It was claustrophobic. Shu, the god of air, had to step in. He pushed his son Geb down and lifted his daughter Nut up. Egyptian art, seen on papyrus and coffins for 3,000 years, depicts the creation scene. Geb, earth, lies on the ground, his body forming mountains. Nut, sky, arches above, her body covered in stars. Shu, atmosphere, stands between them, holding them apart to create the air we breathe. This separation created the space for history. The Ben Mound became the earth. Nut's arch, the sun's path. Atum's weeping, the people. To the ancient Egyptian, the world was not dead matter, but a divine family freeze frame. The ground he farmed was the body of Geb. The sky watched for rain was Nut, and the air he breathed was the strength of Shu. And every year, when the Nile rose and turned the valley back into a dark, silent ocean, he knew that the cycle was resetting. The Nun was returning. The chaos was washing away the old year's mistakes. And he would wait, watching the water level, looking for that first slick, shiny bump of mud to break the surface, the return of the mound, the promise that creation was happening all over again. This is the bedrock of the Egyptian mind, the belief that order is beautiful, but it is temporary. It must be renewed every morning when the sun rises and every summer when the river floods. We are the tears of the god, living on a hill of mud, surrounded by the water, holding back the dark with our stories. Leave the Nile Valley now. Let the sun set on the calm black waters of Egypt and travel east. Cross the red sands of the Sinai, cross the rocky hills of the Levant, until you reach the place where the horizon flattens out into an endless sea of reeds and clay. This is the land between the rivers. The Greeks called it Mesopotamia. Today we call it Iraq. Here the water does not rise and fall with the gentle clockwork precision of the Egyptian flood. Here the water fights. To the south, where the sweet waters of the Tigris and Euphrates meet the salt waters of the Persian Gulf, there is a zone of turbulence. The river pushes out, the sea pushes in. The silt swirls in vast, choking clouds. The wind howls over the marshes, flattening the reeds. It was here, watching this violent mingling of currents, that the Sumerians and Babylonians found their story of the beginning. Before the world was solid, there were only two bodies of water. The first was Apsu. He was the freshwater ocean, the sweet water, the water of the aquifers and the rivers, the water that keeps men alive. He was masculine, quiet, and deep. The second was Tiamat. She was the saltwater ocean, the bitter water, the chaotic sea that storms and rages. She was the mother of all, vast and glittering. In the beginning, Apsu and Tiamat mingled their waters together. This wasn't a battle, not yet. It was a slurry, a formless, sleepy drift where nothing had a name and no island had raised its head. But from this mixing of sweet and salt, the younger gods were born. These new gods were not watery and silent like their parents. They were the gods of activity. They were the gods of the wind, the gods of the storm, the gods of the sky. In the poetic imagination of the city builders, these younger gods represented civilization. They were the energy of digging canals, of baking bricks, of raising walls. And civilization makes noise. The texts tell us that the younger gods surged back and forth inside the belly of Tiamat. They danced, they shouted, they created commotion. To the ancient parents, the primordial waters, this noise was unbearable. Apsu, the freshwater, just wanted to sleep. He wanted the silence of the deep aquifer. He grew annoyed. He proposed a plan to destroy his children so that silence could return. But the younger gods were quick. They struck first, putting Apsu into a deep, eternal sleep, which is why fresh water is still found underground, sleeping beneath the earth. Now, Tiamat was alone, and Tiamat was furious. The saltwater mother did not just grieve, she changed. The chaotic sea hardened into a weapon. She birthed 11 kinds of monsters to wage war on the younger gods. She made the viper, the dragon, the great lion, the mad dog, the scorpion man. She turned herself into a dragon of chaos, a storm of salt and fury, intended to wipe out the noise of order forever. The younger gods were terrified. They looked at the horizon, dark with monsters, and they knew they could not fight chaos with mere strength. They needed a plan. They needed a king. They chose Marduk. Marduk was the god of Babylon, the ultimate city god. He did not go to battle armed with just a sword. He went armed with the tools of a storm chaser. He took the four winds. He took a net. He took the lightning bolt. The battle between Marduk and Tiamat is the central pillar of Mesopotamian thought. It is not good versus evil. It is design versus nature. Tiamat opened her mouth to swallow him, a mouth as wide as the ocean trench. But Marduk did not strike with a blade. He unleashed the Imhulu wind, the evil wind, into her face. The wind filled her belly, inflating her so she could not close her jaws. She was distended, held open by the force of the gale. Then Marduk cast his net. Pause on that image. A net. It is the tool of a fisherman, yes, but it is also a grid. It is the symbol of containment. Marduk captured chaos. He trapped the formless salt water inside the structure of his net. With Tiamat immobilized, Marduk fired a single arrow into her heart. The chaos died. The ocean stopped raging. Now came the work of the builder. Marduk did not leave the body of Tiamat to rot. He used it as lumber. He acted like a master carpenter dismantling an old house to build a new one. He split her body like a shellfish into two halves. With the upper half, he constructed the roof of the sky. He set up bars and posted guards to make sure her waters would not crash down. A perfect description of how the ancients viewed the danger of rain and flood. With the lower half, he constructed the earth. He leveled the ground. He piled up mountains over her head. And then, in a detail that is both gruesome and tender, Marduk pierced her eyes. From the weeping eyes of the dead Tiamat, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers flowed out. The water that watered the fields of Babylon, the water that filled the irrigation ditches, was the sorrow of the chaotic mother, channeled now into productive lines. Marduk then measured out the year. He set the stations for the stars. He established the calendar. He assigned the gods their duties. He turned the carcass of a monster into a functioning machine. This is the message the Babylonians heard every new year. They lived in a land that was constantly trying to kill them, through floods, salt, and storms. Their creation myth told them that the world is a carcass. It is a dead dragon that has been propped up by the beams of the sky and the net of the law. Order is not natural. Order is something you build and something you must maintain. The city is a fortress of geometry, standing against the formless salt sea. And every time a canal was dredged, every time a brick was laid, the people were helping Marduk hold the net tight, keeping the chaos at bay for one more year. Now, the landscape changes again. We leave the flat, heavy clay of the river valleys. We leave the silt and the reeds behind. We travel west, crossing the Aegean Sea, until the water turns a deep, crystalline blue, and the horizon is broken by jagged shapes. We have arrived in Greece. This is not a land of broad, predictable floods. It is a land of sharp edges. It is a place of limestone mountains that scrape the sky, of isolated valleys, of storms that gather on peaks and crash down without warning. The light here is harsh and revealing. It does not hide secrets in the mud. It exposes them on the rock. And so, the creation story of the Greeks is not about mud or water. It is about power. It is about the violent, necessary struggle to establish law over brute force. In the beginning, before the mountains rose or the sea found its bed, there was chaos. The word chaos in Greek, chaos, does not mean confusion. It means the gap, the void, the yawning abyss. It is the terrifying sensation of falling. It is the empty space that exists before gravity. Out of this terrifying gap, three fundamental forces emerged, not by being built, but by simply becoming. First came Gaia, the earth, the broad-bosomed solid ground, the foundation of all things. Second came Tartarus, the deep, dark pit, beneath the earth, the basement of reality. Third came Eros, desire, not romantic love, but the raw, driving force of attraction that pulls things together. Gaia, the earth, was lonely, so she spun a covering for herself. She birthed Uranus, the sky. Imagine the early universe as the Greeks saw it. It was claustrophobic. Uranus, the sky, lay flat against Gaia, the earth. There was no atmosphere, no breathing room. He covered her completely, a suffocating blanket of stars. In this tight embrace, they produced children. The Titans, the Cyclops, the 100-handed ones. But Uranus hated his children. They were monstrous, loud, and rough. Too chaotic for the perfect starry order he wanted to maintain. So every time Gaia tried to give birth, Uranus pushed the children back down into the earth. Pause to feel the tension of this. The earth is pregnant, swollen, groaning under the weight of the sky. The pressure is building. The landscape is screaming. This is the geological memory of a land prone to earthquakes, where the ground shakes and splits. Gaia could not bear the pain. She created a new material, gray flint, and shaped it into a sickle, a jagged, serrated blade. She called out to her unborn children, asking for a champion. Only the youngest dared to answer. Cronus. Cronus is often called time, but in the earliest myths, he is the agricultural god. He is the harvest, and the harvest requires cutting. When Uranus descended that night to lie upon the earth, Cronus reached out from his hiding place. With his left hand, he grabbed his father. With his right hand, he swung the sickle. He severed the connection between sky and earth. Uranus screamed and recoiled, lifting away from the ground forever. For the first time, there was space. There was between. The blood of the wounded sky fell onto the earth, creating the Furies and the giants, because violence always breeds more violence. But the separation was done. The dome of the heavens was raised, and the stage was set for the reign of the Titans. But the cycle of Greek myth is a wheel that grinds everything down. Cronus, the revolutionary son, became the tyrant father. He learned a prophecy. You will be overthrown by your own child, just as you overthrew your father. Cronus decided to stop time. He decided to stop the future. Every time his wife, Rhea, gave birth to a god, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, Cronus snatched the infant and swallowed it whole. This is a terrifying image, but viewed through the lens of atmospheric pragmatism. It is a poetic truth about time. Time eats everything it produces. The days are born, and the days are consumed. Nothing survives the hunger of the clock. But Rhea, the mother, was tired of grief. When her sixth child was born, she hid him. She wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and handed it to Cronus. The great Titan, blinded by his own paranoia, swallowed the rock without looking. The child who survived was Zeus. Zeus was raised in secret, in a cave on the island of Crete. He was fed on the milk of a goat and the honey of bees. The soldiers outside the cave beat their shields with spears to drown out the sound of his crying, the first noise of the new order, hiding from the silence of the old. When Zeus grew up, he did not just challenge his father with strength. He challenged him with justice. He recruited allies. He slipped Cronus a potion that forced him to vomit up the stone and the 5 swallowed siblings. Now, the gods stood against the Titans. the new against the old, the Olympians against the earthborn. The war that followed, the Titanomachy, lasted 10 years. It was the clash of forces. The Titans were raw elemental power. Gravity, ocean pressure, tectonic shift. The Olympians were refined power, law, civilization, technology. Zeus won, not because he was stronger, but because he was smarter. He released the 100-handed ones and the Cyclops from the pit of Tartarus. He built a coalition. He accepted the lightning bolt, the ultimate weapon of precision energy, from the Cyclops. From the top of Mount Olympus, Zeus hurled his lightning. He drove the Titans back. He locked them in Tartarus, sealing the heavy doors of the underworld. The dust settled. The screaming stopped. The world was no longer a claustrophobic sandwich of earth and sky, nor a belly full of swallowed children. It was a hierarchy. Zeus drew lots with his brothers to divide the cosmos, establishing the first constitution of the universe. Poseidon got the sea. Hades got the underworld. Zeus got the sky and the supreme authority. The earth was common ground for all. This is the genius of the Greek creation myth. It ends not with a magical garden, but with a political settlement. It establishes a cosmic balance of power. Zeus is the king, but he rules in consultation with a council of 12. He embodies dike, justice. For the Greeks, living in their independent, quarrelsome city-states, this was the only story that made sense. Creation wasn't a one-time event of mud and water. It was a constant struggle to keep the tyrant, Chaos, Cronus, locked in the basement. Order was maintained by the lightning bolt, the swift, illuminating application of law. Looking up at the peaks of Olympus, shrouded in storm clouds, the ancient Greeks saw the headquarters of the administration that kept the universe from falling back into the gap. They saw a hard-won peace, bought with the blood of fathers and the cunning of sons. Leave the warmth of the Mediterranean, forget the blue waters of Greece and the golden sun of Egypt. Turn your face north. Travel until the trees disappear, until the color drains from the world, and there is only the sound of wind hissing over packed snow. We are in the world of the Norse, the Scandinavia of the Vikings. Here, creation is not a gift from a benevolent sun god. It is an accident. It is a chemical reaction that happens in the dark. And it is a story that teaches a very hard lesson. Life feeds on death. In the beginning, there was no earth, no sky, no sea. There was only the gap. The Norse called it Ginnungagap, the yawning void. It was a silence so deep, it felt like a scream. But this void was not empty. It was bordered by two extremes of physics. To the north lay Niflheim, the world of fog and ice, a place of absolute zero, where poisonous rivers froze into glaciers, blacker than obsidian. To the south lay Muspelheim, the world of fire, a furnace of raging heat, filled with lava and sparks. Creation began where these two fronts collided. Imagine the sound, the sizzling hiss of lava meeting a glacier, the groan of ice, expanding and cracking. As the heat of Muspelheim touched the rime of Niflheim, a strange alchemy occurred. The ice did not just melt, it sweated, it dripped, and in the dripping darkness of the void, the sludge of life began to form. It coalesced into a shape, a massive sleeping horror. The first being, Ymir. Ymir was a frost giant, a Jotun. He was not a god. He was raw, undirected biological mass. He slept in the slush, and as he slept, he sweated. From his left armpit, a male and a female grew. From his feet, a six-headed son was born. This is a grotesque image, but it captures the Norse view of nature. Nature is prolific, monstrous, and unthinking. It grows in the damp and the dark, like mold. But Ymir was not alone. The melting ice also revealed a cow, Audhumla. This is the pragmatic genius of the Norse myth. In a frozen wasteland, what is the most valuable thing imaginable? A cow, a source of milk. Audhumla fed Ymir with her milk rivers, but she needed to eat too. She licked the salty rhinestones of the ice, and as she licked, she uncovered something buried in the glacier. On the first day, hair appeared. On the second day, a head. On the third day, a whole man. Buri, the grandfather of the gods. Now the board was set. On one side, the chaotic, multiplying giants, Ymir's brood. On the other, the orderly, handsome gods, Buri's descendants. Buri had a son, Bor, who married a giantess. They had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 brothers looked at the universe. It was crowded. It was chaotic. Ymir, the massive giant, was taking up all the space. He was consuming all the resources. There was nowhere to build a home. So the gods made a cold, calculated decision. They decided to commit the first murder. They attacked Ymir. The battle was brief and bloody. They slaughtered the primal giant. The myth says that so much blood flowed from his wounds that it drowned the entire race of frost giants, creating the first flood, except for 2 who escaped in a wooden box to repopulate the species. Now, Odin and his brothers had a corpse, a carcass the size of a continent, and like pragmatic hunters on the tundra, they wasted nothing. They used every part of the kill. This is the most visceral of all creation myths. The world we live in is not made of magic dust. It is made of meat and bone. They took Ymir's flesh and made the earth. When you walk on the soil, you are walking on the muscle of the dead giant. They took his bones and smashed them to make the mountains and cliffs. They took his teeth and splinters of bone to make the rocks and boulders. They took his blood and poured it out to make the sea. The ocean is a wound that never healed. They took his skull, the curved white dome of bone, and lifted it up. They set it over the earth to become the sky. To hold it up, they assigned 4 dwarfs to stand at the corners: Nordi, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri. North, south, east, west. They took his brains and threw them into the air to become the clouds. A dark Norse joke. The weather is gloomy because it is made of a dead giant's thoughts. Finally, they looked at the sparks flying from Muspelheim. They caught them and pinned them to the inside of the skull to make the stars, the sun, and the moon. But the world was still dangerous. The giants who escaped the flood lived out in the deep, cold distance, in Utgard, the outer enclosure. They were always trying to get in, to freeze the world again. So Odin built a fortress. He took Ymir's eyelashes, or eyebrows, depending on the translation, and built a massive fence around the center of the world, a barricade against the dark. Inside that fence, he created a safe zone. He called it Midgard, the middle enclosure. That is where we live. We live behind a wall of eyelashes huddled around the fire, knowing that outside the fence, the giants are still waiting. This myth tells you everything you need to know about the Viking mindset. The world is built on violence. Order is established by killing chaos and dismantling it. And safety is temporary. We are living inside a fortress made of death, besieged by the cold, waiting for the day the walls fall down. Ragnarok. It is a bleak story, but it is also a story of immense resilience. It says, the universe is cold and hard, but we can carve a home out of it if we have the will to use the knife. The wind of the north dies down. The ice melts. The sharp, jagged horizons of Scandinavia fade into a mist. We travel south and east, crossing the high passes of the Himalayas until the air turns warm and heavy with the scent of jasmine and rain. We are in India. Here the landscape does not feel like a carcass or a construction site. It feels like a living body. The rivers are vast and slow. The heat is a physical weight. And time does not move in a straight line, marching from a beginning to an end. Time here is a wheel. It turns, it returns. The Hindu creation myth is unique because it is not really a story of making. It is a story of waking. In the beginning, if we can even use that word, there was no sun, no moon, no stars. There was only Brahman. Brahman is not a god sitting on a throne. Brahman is the ocean of consciousness. Imagine a dark, limitless sea of potential, silent and still. It is the stuff of reality before it takes shape. It is the silence between thoughts. In this dark ocean, a single object appeared. It was not built, it floated. It was the Hiranyagarbha, the golden embryo, the cosmic egg. Picture a glowing golden sphere, floating in absolute blackness. It shimmered with heat and light, containing the seed of everything that would ever exist. It floated there for a year of the cosmos, a span of time, beyond human counting. And then, the shell cracked. From the golden womb, the first form emerged. But in the Hindu tradition, creation is so vast that it requires 3 faces to manage it. The Trimurti. First, there is Vishnu, the preserver. In many versions of the myth, before the egg cracks, Vishnu is already there. He is sleeping. He lies on the coils of a massive, endless serpent called Ananta Shesha, floating on the milky ocean. This is the most peaceful image in all of mythology. The god of the universe is asleep. He is dreaming. And we, the galaxies, the mountains, the people, are his dream. As Vishnu sleeps, a lotus flower grows from his navel. The stalk rises up, swaying in the cosmic wind. And inside the petals of that lotus sits Brahma, the creator. Brahma opens his eyes. He looks around. He sees nothing but the dark ocean. He feels alone. But then he hears a sound, a vibration. Om. The sound of the universe humming. Guided by this sound, Brahma begins to work. But he does not use a hammer or a knife. He uses his mind. He splits the golden egg. The upper half of the shell becomes the heavens. The lower half becomes the earth. The white of the egg becomes the air in between. Brahma creates the world not once, but continuously. He defines the span of time. And this is where the Hindu myth becomes truly staggering. In the West, we think of creation as a week of work. In India, creation is a kalpa, a day of Brahma. One day for the creator god lasts for 4.32 billion human years. During this day, life flourishes. Civilizations rise and fall. Stars burn out. Then night falls. Brahma goes to sleep. When Brahma sleeps, the universe dissolves. It melts back into the ocean. The stars go out. The earth becomes water again. This is the pralaya, the dissolution. Everything waits in the dark for another 4.32 billion years until Brahma wakes up and starts the dream again. This cycle goes on forever. There is no final end. There is no final judgment. There is only the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, creation, destruction. And overseeing this destruction is the third face, Shiva, the destroyer. Shiva is not evil. He is necessary. He is the force that clears the board. When the cycle is finished, when the universe is old and tired, Shiva opens his third eye. He performs the Tandava, the cosmic dance. He dances the universe out of existence so that it can rest. Why did this specific myth rise from the Indian subcontinent? Look at the land. India is governed by the monsoon. Every year the heat builds until it is unbearable. The earth cracks, the plants die, the dust chokes the sky. It feels like the end of the world. And then the rains come. The deluge washes everything away. The rivers swell, but out of that destruction, the green shoots appear. Life returns, lush and overwhelming. The ancient sages saw this and realized nothing ever really dies. It just changes form. The comfort of the Hindu creation myth is its scale. It tells us that our anxieties, our deadlines, our fears are incredibly small. We are living in the flicker of a god's eyelid. We are part of a song that has been sung 1 billion times before and will be sung 1 billion times again. It removes the pressure of perfection. The universe is not a project that must be finished. It is a dance that must be experienced. As we drift in the cosmic ocean, watching the lotus sway, we realize that we are safe. We are held in the coils of the great snake, floating on the water, waiting for the next breath. The wheel of India turns, and we move on. We leave the heat of the subcontinent and travel further east, crossing the great expanse of the Pacific Ocean, until we see a chain of islands rising out of the mist, like the spine of a dragon. We are in Japan. Here the atmosphere changes completely. The air is not heavy with the scent of jasmine or the dust of the desert. It is crisp. It smells of cedar, of salt spray, and of rain falling on moss. The landscape is volcanic and green, a place where the mountains are steep and the sea is never far away. In the Japanese imagination, the beginning of the world was not a void nor a battle. It was a formless soup. The Kojiki, the ancient record of ancient matters, describes the early universe as oily. It was like a jellyfish floating on water, or the yolk of an egg, drifting, heavy, and undefined. There was no solid land. There was only the silent, swirling potential of the sea. High above this oily silence stood the Ama no Ukihashi, the floating bridge of heaven. And standing on this bridge were two beings, not a crowd of gods, but a couple. Izanagi, the male who invites, and Izanami, the female who invites. They were young gods, entrusted by the elders of heaven with a specific task: to make, consolidate, and give birth to this drifting land. They were not given a hammer or a sword. They were given a tool of immense elegance, the Ame no Nuboko, the heavenly jeweled spear. This is the first image of the Japanese creation myth. Two figures standing in the mist, looking down at the chaos, holding a spear. It is an image of precision. They lowered the spear into the ocean. They did not strike the water, they stirred it. The sound of this stirring is recorded in the ancient text as kaworo kaworo, a churning, curdling sound. They churned the salt water until it thickened. When they lifted the spear, the heavy brine dripped from the jeweled tip. The drops did not dissolve back into the ocean. They hardened. They piled up. And there, amidst the waves, the first island formed, Onogoro, the self-curdling island. This is a creation myth for a people who understand the sea. It frames land, not as a separate element, but as concentrated ocean. The earth is salt and water, bound together by the will of the gods. Izanagi and Izanami descended from the bridge onto this small, lonely island. They built a central pillar, the heavenly pillar, and a hall to live in. But they were not finished. They had created the ground, but they had not yet created the life of the land. To do this, they had to perform a ritual. They invented the wedding ceremony. They agreed to walk around the heavenly pillar in opposite directions. Izanagi to the left, Izanami to the right. When they met on the other side, they would greet each other and unite. They walked, they met, and Izanami, filled with joy, spoke first. "Oh, what a handsome man," she said. Izanagi replied, "Oh, what a beautiful woman." They consummated their union. But later, when their first child was born, it was a tragedy. The child was Hiruko, the leech child. He had no bones. He could not stand. He was a failed creation, a being of pure, structureless flesh. Sorrowfully, they placed him in a reed boat and set him adrift on the currents. Why did this happen? The couple returned to the elders in heaven to ask. The answer was simple, and it reveals the core of Shinto philosophy. The ritual was performed incorrectly. In the logic of the myth, Izanami speaking first had disrupted the balance of yin and yang. In Japanese, in and yo. It was not a moral sin. It was a procedural error. Creation requires perfect order. It requires the right words, at the right time, in the right sequence. So they tried again. They walked around the pillar. They met. This time Izanagi spoke first. The balance was restored. From this correct union, the islands of Japan were born. Not made of mud, but born from the womb of the goddess. They gave birth to the island of Awaji, then Shikoku, then Kyushu, then the great main island, Honshu. They birthed the mountains. They birthed the waterfalls. They birthed the wind that blows through the pines. In Shinto, everything is alive. The land is not dead matter. It is kami. The mountains are gods. The rivers are gods. The trees are gods. The world is a crowded, spirited family, born from the same parents as the people who walk upon it. But creation involves heat, and heat is dangerous. When Izanami gave birth to the god of fire, Kagutsuchi, she was burned. The fire god scorched her womb. She fell ill, and despite Izanagi's desperate care, she died. She vanished into Yomi, the land of the dead. Izanagi, grief-stricken, followed her. He traveled down into the dark, just as Orpheus did in Greece, just as Inanna did in Sumer. He found her in the shadowy hall of Yomi. He begged her to come back. "My lovely wife," he said, "the lands that you and I were making are not yet finished. You must come back." But it was too late. She had eaten the food of the underworld. Her body had begun to rot. When Izanagi lit a tooth of his comb to see her in the dark, he saw maggots squirming in her flesh. He saw thunder gods dwelling in her chest. Terrified by the Kagare, the pollution of death, Izanagi fled. He ran back up the tunnel to the surface, sealing the entrance with a massive boulder. From the other side, Izanami screamed a curse. "I will kill 1,000 of your people every day." Izanagi shouted back a vow of life. "Then, I will build 1,500 birthing huts every day." This is the balance of the Japanese world. Death claims 1,000, but life produces 1,500. We stay ahead of the darkness by numbers and by will. But the story does not end with grief. It ends with cleansing. Izanagi emerged from the underworld, covered in the filth of death. He felt heavy, dirty, polluted. He needed to wash. He went to a river mouth, in a grove of orange trees. He threw off his clothes. He stepped into the cool, running water. This is the first Misogi, the ritual purification. In Shinto, sin is not a stain on the soul. It is dirt on the body. It can be washed away. As Izanagi washed, new gods were born from the droplets falling from his body. The water washed away the darkness of Yomi. He washed his left eye, and Amaterasu, the sun goddess, was born. She climbed into the sky to illuminate the world. He washed his right eye, and Tsukuyomi, the moon god, was born to rule the night. He washed his nose, and Susanoo, the storm god, was born to rule the seas. The climax of the Japanese creation myth is not a war or a construction project. It is a bath. The supreme order of the universe, the sun, the moon, and the storm, comes from the act of cleaning up. This tells us everything about the culture that preserved this story. The world is beautiful, but it is easily polluted. Death, illness, and chaos are forms of dirt. To maintain the world, we must constantly wash. We must sweep the shrine. We must clap our hands to clear the air. As we stand on the shore of the island, born from a drop of brine, watching the sun rise over the clean water, we understand the lesson. We are the keepers of a sanctuary. Our job is not to conquer nature, but to keep it pure. We leave the salt spray of the Japanese islands and cross the East China Sea, moving inland until the air turns dry and dusty. We are entering the vast central plains of China, where the Yellow River winds like a dragon through the Loess soil. Here the scale of the world changes. The horizons are endless. The mountains are pillars of stone, piercing the clouds. And the creation myth reflects this immense weight. It is not a story of magic words or swift battles. It is a story of exhaustion. It is a story that says, the world exists because someone worked themselves to death to build it. In the beginning, there was only a cosmic egg. Inside this egg, the universe was a chaotic slurry of yin and yang, darkness and light, heavy and soft, all mixed together in a swirling gray fog. And floating in the center of this egg, sleeping in the fetal position, was a giant, Pangu. Pangu slept for 18,000 years. As he slept, he grew. And as he grew, the egg became cramped. Finally, he woke up. He opened his eyes, but he could see nothing in the murky chaos. He felt suffocated by the lack of space. In a fit of frustration, Pangu grabbed a broadaxe, the first tool, and struck out into the darkness. With a mighty crack, the egg split. The light, clear, and airy parts of the chaos, yang, floated up to become the heavens. The heavy, dark, and murky parts, yin, sank down to become the earth. But Pangu knew that if he let go, the two halves would snap back together. The chaos would return. So, he made the ultimate sacrifice. He stood up. He placed his feet on the earth and his hands against the sky. He became the pillar of the world. Every day, the sky rose 10 feet higher. Every day, the earth grew 10 feet thicker. And every day, Pangu grew 10 feet taller. For another 18,000 years, the giant stood there. Imagine the physical strain, the isolation. He could not sleep. He could not eat. He could not rest his arms. He was the only thing keeping the universe from collapsing. This is a profoundly pragmatic myth. It teaches that civilization is not a given. It is a burden held up by the endurance of the strong. Finally, Pangu realized the job was done. The sky was fixed. The earth was solid. He looked at his work, gave a long sigh, and died. But in China, death is not the end of usefulness. Pangu's body was too valuable to waste. As he fell, his corpse transformed into the infrastructure of the world. His breath became the wind and the clouds. His voice became the thunder. His left eye became the sun, and his right eye became the moon. His blood became the rivers. His muscles became the fertile land. His hair became the stars. His sweat became the rain. Even the parasites on his skin, the fleas, were transformed by the wind into the animals that roam the earth. The message is clear. The landscape is not dead matter. It is the legacy of an ancestor. When you plant rice, you are planting it in the flesh of Pangu. When you drink from the river, you are drinking his blood. But the world was still lonely. Pangu had built the house, but there was no one to live in it. Enter Nuwa. Nuwa was a goddess, with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a serpent. She slithered through the beautiful, empty world, looking at the mountains and the rivers. She felt a profound sadness. The world was too quiet. She stopped by the banks of the Yellow River. The mud there was soft and golden. She knelt down and scooped up a handful of clay. This moment defines the Chinese view of humanity. We are not made of stardust or tears. We are made of yellow earth. We belong to the soil. Nuwa began to sculpt. She worked with the patience of a master craftsman. She made little figures with legs and arms. As soon as she set them down, they laughed and danced. These were the first humans. But the work was slow. Nuwa realized that sculpting each person by hand would take forever. Her back ached, her hands were tired, so she invented a mass production technique. She took a rope or a vine and dipped it into the wet mud of the riverbank. She swirled it around until it was coated in heavy slurry. Then she flicked the rope through the air. Droplets of mud flew off the rope and landed on the ground. Each droplet became a person. This part of the myth explains the social hierarchy of ancient China. The humans Nuwa sculpted by hand became the nobles, the emperors, the scholars, the leaders. They were crafted with intention and detail. The humans formed from the scattered droplets became the commoners, the farmers, the laborers, the masses. They were made of the same earth, but born of a simpler, faster process. It sounds harsh to modern ears, but it reflects a society that valued structure. Everyone has a place. Some are the pillars, some are the scattered stones. But Nuwa's work was not done. Years later, a catastrophe struck. The pillars of heaven cracked. The sky tilted to the northwest, which is why the sun and moon move that way. And the earth tilted to the southeast, which is why the great rivers of China flow that way. Water poured from the sky. Fire raged. Nuwa did not flee. She went to work again. She gathered stones of 5 colors. She melted them down in a furnace, creating a magical mortar. With this paste, she patched the hole in the sky. She cut off the legs of a giant tortoise to use as new pillars, propping up the heavens once more. She is the ultimate caretaker. Pangu built the world. Nuwa repaired it. The Chinese creation myth is a story of competence. It tells us that the universe is a construction site. It requires hard labor to build and constant maintenance to keep from falling apart. We are the mud of the Yellow River, given life by a lonely goddess living in a house built from the body of a giant who refused to let the sky fall. The dust of China settles. We turn our faces southwest, crossing the Indian Ocean or the dry expanse of the Silk Road, until we reach the massive beating heart of the world. We are in Africa. This is a continent so vast that it cannot be contained by a single story. It is the cradle of our species, the place where the first human eyes looked up at the stars. Here the earth is not yellow clay or gray limestone. It is red laterite, rich with iron, baking under a sun that feels closer than anywhere else on earth. In the African imagination, creation is often a story of descent. The sky is full of life, and the earth is a garden waiting to be planted. Let us begin in West Africa, with the Yoruba people of Nigeria. In the beginning there was no solid land. There was only the sky above and the water below. The sky god, Olorun, ruled the heavens. It was a place of light, luxury, and ancient copper palaces. Below lay the vast, dark ocean, ruled by the goddess Olokun. It was silent, wet, and misty. There was no middle ground, no place to stand. One day, Obatala, a younger god, Orisha, looked down from the sky. He saw the monotonous gray water and felt that something was missing. He went to Olorun and asked for permission to create dry land. Olorun agreed, but he did not give Obatala a lightning bolt or a hammer. He gave him a survival kit. Obatala visited the goldsmith of heaven and commissioned a long gold chain, long enough to reach from the sky to the water. He took a snail shell filled with sand. He took a white hen. He took a black cat for company. And he took a palm nut. This creates a beautiful image of creation, not as a war, but as an expedition. Obatala is the first explorer. He hooked the chain to the corner of the sky and began to climb down. For 7 days, he descended. The chain swayed in the cosmic wind. Below him, the water waited. When he reached the end of the chain, he was still hanging over the ocean. He could not jump, so he reached into his pouch. He took the snail shell and poured the sand out. It was a tiny amount of earth against an endless ocean, but it was enough. Then, he dropped the white hen. The hen landed on the mound of sand. It did what chickens do. It began to scratch. It kicked the sand backward and forward, spreading it out. Wherever the hen scratched, the sand multiplied. It pushed the waters back. It formed hills, valleys, and plains. Obatala let go of the chain and stepped onto the first solid ground, Ife, the place where the earth spreads. He planted the palm nut. Immediately a forest of palm trees sprang up. The landscape was ready. But Obatala was not finished. He wanted people. He sat down on the red earth and began to mold figures out of clay, just as Nuwa did in China. But the African myth adds a layer of profound humanity to the story. The work was hot. The sun beat down. Obatala grew thirsty. He tapped the palm trees he had just created and drank the palm wine. The wine was sweet and strong. As he drank, his hands became unsteady. His vision blurred. But he kept working. In his intoxicated state, he molded humans who were misshapen. Some had bent limbs. Some had blind eyes. Some were fragile. He did not realize his mistake until the wine wore off. When he woke up and saw what he had done, he did not destroy them. He vowed to become the protector of all those who are broken or disabled. This myth teaches a deep pragmatism. Perfection is not the goal. Life is messy. Even the Creator gets tired. Even the Creator makes mistakes. Humanity is not fallen because of a sin. We are simply the work of a God who had a long day in the sun. Now, travel north and west to the cliffs of Bandiagara in Mali. Here live the Dogon. The Dogon are famous stargazers. Long before telescopes, their mythology spoke of the companion stars of Sirius. Their creation myth is not about mud. It is about physics. In the beginning, there was only Amma. Amma was the egg of the universe. But inside this egg, there was a seed, the Popilu, the Digitaria seed. This seed was microscopic, yet it was heavy. It contained all the potential of the cosmos. It was pure, compressed energy. The myth says that the seed began to vibrate. It spun inside the egg of Amma. The vibration became so intense that it ruptured the shell. The universe did not explode in a chaotic bang. It unfolded. The Dogon say the universe opened like a granary door. It spiraled out in a cone. From this spinning seed came the stars, the planets, and the earth. From this seed came the Numo, water spirits who brought the skills of civilization. This is an agricultural cosmology. To the Dogon, the universe is a farm. The stars are seeds scattered in the furrow of the night sky. The earth is a field waiting to be harvested. The pragmatism here is the connection between the macro and the micro. The smallest grain of millet you hold in your hand is structurally identical to the universe itself. If you understand the seed, you understand the galaxy. These African myths share a common texture. They are stories of connection. In the Yoruba myth, the connection is the golden chain. The earth is not cut off from heaven. It is tethered to it. We are suspended from the sky. The ancestors can climb down. We can climb up. In the Dogon myth, the connection is the seed. We are made of the same vibrating material as the stars. The African landscape, with its blinding sun, its vast ancient rocks, and its rhythm of planting and harvest, taught its people that creation is not a one-time event of the past. It is a continuous descent of power, from above, pouring into the soil, scratched out by the hen, growing in the dark, waiting to be drunk like wine. We stand on the red earth of Ife, holding the golden chain, feeling the vibration of the seed in our pockets, knowing that we are connected to the source. We cross the Atlantic Ocean now, leaving the old worlds of Africa and Europe behind. We travel west until we see a coastline of deep green forests, vast lakes, and rivers that cut through canyons of red rock. We are in the Americas. Here the creation story takes on a completely different texture. It is not about a god commanding from a throne. It is not about a giant's corpse. It is about a community. In the Native American traditions, particularly those of the Northeast woodlands, like the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee, creation begins with an accident. It begins with a fall. In the beginning, there was no earth here. There was only a vast, endless ocean. Above this ocean, far up in the clouds, was the sky world. It was a place of light and plenty, where the sky people lived. In the center of the sky world stood a great tree. Its roots ran deep, and its branches were heavy with flowers and fruits. It was the axis of their universe. But one day, a pregnant woman, Sky Woman, became curious. In some versions, she was hungry for the bark of the roots. In others, she was pushed during a domestic dispute. But the result was the same. She dug at the roots of the great tree. She dug until she broke through the floor of the sky. She slipped, and she fell. Imagine the sensation. Falling from the clouds, tumbling through the air, leaving the safety of home behind. Below her, there was only dark water. She was going to drown. But she was not alone. The animals of the water saw her coming. The birds, the geese, and the swans flew up. They knit their wings together to form a knit. They caught her. They broke her fall and carried her gently downward. But there was nowhere to put her. There was no land. The animals held a council on the water. The great turtle floated on the surface. "Place her on my back," the turtle said. So the birds set Sky Woman down on the shell of the turtle. But she needed earth to live. She needed soil to plant the seeds she had grabbed from the great tree as she fell. The animals decided to help. They knew there was mud at the bottom of the ocean, but it was deep, deeper than anyone had ever gone. The beaver tried. He dove down, his tail slapping the water. He stayed down for a long time, but he floated back up, exhausted and empty-handed. The loon tried. He dove deep into the dark, but he too failed. Finally, the humble muskrat stepped forward. He was small, he was not strong, but he was determined. He dove. He swam down into the crushing pressure of the deep. He was gone for so long, the other animals thought he had died. Suddenly, his small body floated to the surface. He was unconscious or dead, in some tellings. But in his clenched paw, there was a tiny smear of dark mud. He had succeeded. The animals took that mud and placed it on the turtle's back. Sky Woman began to dance. She walked in a circle, shuffling her feet in the direction the sun moves. As she danced, the earth expanded. The mud grew. It spread out over the turtle's shell until it became a continent. This is why many native peoples call North America Turtle Island. This myth teaches a profound pragmatism. We survive because the animals saved us. Humanity is not the master of nature. We are the refugees of nature. We are the guests of the turtle. The world was built by the sacrifice of the small, the muskrat, and the support of the strong, the turtle. Now, travel southwest to the dry, high deserts of the Navajo. Dine. Here, the story is not about falling down. It is about climbing up. The Navajo creation myth is a story of emergence. In the beginning, there was the first world. It was black. It was deep underground. It was inhabited by insect people, ants, beetles, dragonflies. They lived in darkness and confusion. They quarreled. They did not know how to live together. Because of their fighting, they were forced to leave. They found a slit in the sky of the first world and climbed up into the second world. This world was blue. It was inhabited by spirit birds. But again, there was conflict. There was not enough food. So they climbed again. up into the third world. This was yellow. It was here that the first man and first woman were formed from ears of corn. White corn for the man, yellow corn for the woman. The wind blew life into them. But the third world flooded. The water rose, forcing the people to flee once more. They planted a giant reed. The reed grew fast, piercing the sky of the third world. The people climbed inside the hollow stem of the reed, moving upward like smoke in a chimney. They emerged into the fourth world, the glittering world, the world we live in today. Here they finally learned how to live in harmony. They set the sun and the moon in the sky. They established the 4 sacred mountains to hold up the heavens. They built the Dogon, the home, to mirror the structure of the universe. The pragmatism of the Navajo myth is social. It acknowledges that society evolves. We start in the dark, fighting like insects. We move through stages. We make mistakes. We get flooded out. But we keep climbing. We keep emerging into the light. Whether falling from the sky or climbing from the ground, the Native American myths agree on one thing. We are part of a system. We are not separate from the corn, the wind, or the muskrat. We are made of the same stuff, and we stand on the same shell. We have walked the mud of the Nile and the ice of the north. We have stood on the floating bridge of Japan and the red cliffs of Mali. We have seen the world hatch from an egg, bleed from a giant, and grow on the back of a turtle. Now, we must take a step back. Imagine spreading a map of the world on a wooden table in a quiet library. Place a pin in every culture we have visited: Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Scandinavia, India, China, West Africa, North America. These places are separated by thousands of miles. They are separated by oceans, by deserts, and by millennia. The people who told these stories never met. A Viking never spoke to a Mayan. A Yoruba priest never shared a meal with a Taoist sage. And yet, if you look closely at the stories they told, you begin to see a ghost in the machine. You see a pattern. Why is it that when humanity closes its eyes and imagines the beginning, we almost always see the same things? The pattern of the water. First we see the water. In Egypt it is none. In Babylon, Tiamat. In Japan, the oily brine. In America, the endless ocean. Even in the Bible, the Spirit hovers over the face of the deep. Why water? Because to the ancient mind, and to the modern mind, water is the ultimate paradox. It is life, but it is also formlessness. It is the thing that has no shape of its own. It dissolves boundaries. When we fear the dark, we are really fearing the ocean of the dark, the place where we cannot stand, where we cannot breathe, where there is no up or down. The universal human nightmare is drowning. And so the universal human hope is the island, the Ben Mound, the turtle's back, the coagulation of the salt. We all share the same deep psychological need for solid ground. The pattern of the split second, we see the separation. The cosmic egg cracks. Shu pushes Nut away from Geb. Pangu holds the sky, apart from the earth. Cronus cuts his father. Why must the world be broken to be made? Because life requires space. You cannot breathe if the sky is crushing you. You cannot grow if you are trapped in the shell. These myths are teaching us a hard psychological truth. Growth requires rupture. To be born, we must leave the womb. To become independent, we must push away our parents. To build a civilization, we must clear the forest. The act of creation is always an act of violence against the status quo. The perfect silence of the void must be shattered so that the noise of life can begin. The pattern of the clay third. We see the material. Prometheus molds us from mud. Nuwa molds us from yellow earth. Obatala molds us from red clay. The Maori god Tane molds the first woman from red dust. Why mud? Because it is humble. It grounds us. These stories are not arrogant. They do not claim we are made of diamonds or light. They claim we are made of the stuff under our feet. It explains our fragility. We break like pottery. It explains our connection to the land. We are the land, just walking around for a while. And it explains death. We simply return to the clay bank from which we were dug. But there is a spark. In almost every story, the mud is not enough. It needs the breath, spirit, or the tears, emotion, or the blood, sacrifice. We are dirt, yes, but we are dirt that has been kissed by a god. The pattern of the mistake. Finally, we see the flaw. Obatala gets drunk and makes imperfect humans. Ra weeps. Izanami speaks out of turn and births a leech. This is perhaps the most comforting pattern of all. It tells us that the world was not broken by us. We did not ruin a perfect paradise. The world was born complicated. The gods themselves struggled. The giants fought back. The sky tilted. This removes the crushing weight of perfectionism. It says, the universe is a construction site, not a museum. It is okay to be cracked. The first science. We often call these stories myths, a word that has come to mean lie. But they were not lies. They were the first science. Imagine being an ancient person. You stand in a field. You feel the wind. You see the sun rise. You have no telescope, no microscope, no geology text. But you have a brain that demands an answer. Why? Why does the river flood? Because the dragon Tiamat is weeping. Why is there land? Because a god threw sand in the ocean. Why do we die? Because the cycle of Shiva demands it. These explanations were functional. They worked. They allowed a farmer to predict the seasons. They allowed a king to maintain order. They allowed a grieving mother to believe her child had returned to the ancestors. They were the best available hypothesis for the data of reality. And more than that, they were identity. A creation myth tells you who you are. If you are Norse, you are the survivor of a frozen world, living in a fortress built from a giant's bones. You are a warrior. If you are Egyptian, you are the tear of the sun, living on a miraculous island, surrounded by death. You are a gardener. If you are Mayan, you are made of maize dough. You are sustenance. These stories are the DNA of culture. They encode the values of the people who tell them. They tell us that the Japanese value purity, the Chinese value labor, the Greeks value law, and the Americans value the cooperation. So as we synthesize these stories, we realize that we are looking at a single, diamond-like truth, reflected through 10,000 different facets. The truth is this: we are small. The universe is vast. It is dangerous, and it is dark. But we are not alone. We have ancestors, whether they are gods, giants, or muskrats, who built a place for us to stand. They pushed up the sky so we could breathe. They dried out the mud so we could plant. The human pattern is the refusal to accept the dark. It is the stubborn, beautiful insistence that there is a reason we are here. And as long as we keep telling these stories, the sky stays up, the ground stays solid, and the chaos stays outside the gate. The fire in the library burns low. We have traveled far tonight, from the mud of the Nile to the ice of the north, from the back of a great turtle to the dream of a sleeping god. What we found was not a collection of contradictions, but a chorus. Every culture in its own language has whispered the same reassurance. We are not an accident. We are here because the water receded, because the sky was lifted, because a seed was planted. These stories are not just myths. They are the ancient invisible pillars that keep the roof of the world from falling in. They are the shelter our ancestors built for us against the dark. Now, the work of creation is done. The heavy lifting is over. The universe is stable, held in place by the memories we have shared. You can rest now. The ground beneath you is solid. The sky above you is secure. And the chaos is outside the gate. Drift back into the quiet, knowing that you are part of a story that has no end. Thank you for resting with the Wonderium. Sleep well.